Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we have back with us Dr. Robert Hoffman. Robert, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Always great to be on your show.
Well, I love our conversations, and I know that people that listen to them are gaining insight into things that I'm I don't hear talked about anywhere. And I don't, we talk about the paradigm and science and all these big words, but the truth is information doesn't go where it needs to be. I had a guy just leave here, and his father has cancer, and he was going through a treatment. He was in remission. Then he just had a CT scan, and it's metastasized. And his father's older than me, but I don't think by a lot. And he's going through the shock of all that right now. And I've been telling this guy, I want to talk to him. I'll help him, get him onto the call, listen to my podcast. And this guy just won't do it, hasn't done it. And just today, I can tell it's my friend Ray. He's down. His dad, won't listen. And he even shared my case report with him. I mean, I sent everything to him. And, now they told him they want to give him radiation and chemo, and he's already been through it. And, for people who have been through this, these are difficult treatments to go through. And to have somebody tell you got to do another round, like if they told me I had to do chemo again today, I would sit there for a minute before I said, okay. I would say, okay, but it would take me a minute to swallow it because it's rough. It's not an easy thing to handle. And right now, this guy is like trying to decide what to do. And I told him, I go, man, you got to find a way to get your dad to acknowledge how important staying alive is. And that's like the key of it all. Like, you got to want to live. And I just feel, I told him, I go, I get my heart broken twice, 3 times a week from people who say they want help. And then I start talking about what it takes and they lose interest. And I'm just like, wow, I don't get it. But anyways, I want to bring you up to speed. You're already kind of aware of everything that's been going on, but since I got my PET CT back, that seemed to indicate that I'm okay, but it was certainly not definitive. And the problem with the scans is they all have limitations. Number one, the limitation that all of them have is the size of an anomaly that they can recognize. So if you've got cancer cells, 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or maybe even 100,000 cells, nothing's going to
even a few million.
Yeah, nothing's going to see it. It's too small.
Okay.
And there are blood tests that can sometimes be indicators that there's something anomaly going on and maybe give you direction. But to actually see the problem, cancer gets so big and it's already established by the time it's big enough to see. So that's a big, giant problem that people have. And so when you flash up on a scan that says you've metastasized, this stuff's all over your body. It's already a big problem, a huge problem, but it's a problem that can be overcome. And so in my case, the areas of concern did not light up dramatically. There's a couple little spots in my lymph nodes. There's a little spot in my lungs, a little spot in my knee, but none of those were likely cancer related. But they don't know for sure. So I have subsequently, through you, Dr. Hoffman, and your connection with Dr. Sato in Japan and the clinic over there, and Shihiro and Kuji, I've got my plane ticket to go to Japan. I leave on the 12th of April, and my appointment's on the 14th. And I paid for the scan. I had to send them the money up front, and so I'm I'm in the process of going to get the MetPET scan, which we've talked about before, and that will tell me definitively if something large enough to see is present and it's cancerous. Doesn't mean that there's not something smaller creeping around, but we already know everybody's got mutated cells floating around their body. So we all have the propensity to get cancer or to, I think when they call it cancer, it's already something that's developed to the point where, it's malignant. It's become a problem. I also received blood work for what they call SCCA blood test. They call it a liquid biopsy. And Dr. Song approved that, and I'm waiting for the results of it, but they did take the test and submit it. And that's for the squamous cell carcinoma antigen. And again, it'll tell if there's a presence of something in my body that would be likely to indicate that there would be still a problem, but it's certainly not definitive. And that kind of brings me to the point I wanted to get to today, which is, science. And you remember when COVID was here and the disease before that, and the disease before that, and people throw around the word science like it's synonymous with the truth. And they say you got to trust the science, and they got to, what you're doing is not science, and this is science. And they use this word like they know what it means. And I really want to talk about what science is and kind of what it means and how it really affects us. Because if you look through history at what science has said, it's been wrong all the way through. And every time it's wrong until it says, oh, we figured out we were wrong before, but now we know. And then that goes along for a while. And then it says, oh, we figured out we were wrong before, but now we know. And it seems like it's a combination of we keep learning a thing, and then we find out a big portion of it was totally wrong. And now there's a different model, and it goes from biology, the science that you work with, living cells, animals and humans, all the way into, quantum galaxy stuff. They keep finding out they're wrong about big stuff, and they got to go back to the drawing board to figure it out. And I think what happens a lot of times is like we'll build a model of how reality is, right? And we'll say, here's the parts, here's how they work, and within this framework is our paradigm, right? But then somebody will stumble upon something that doesn't fit in there. And all of a sudden it's like, maybe it's a mechanism, maybe it's a protein, or maybe it's a particle or something. All of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, there's no place for this in our paradigm. What do we do with it? And, so I know you've been a scientist for longer than I've been alive. And I think it's really important for people to understand really what the heck science is, and maybe to understand that the truth is something that we can sometimes find in science, but it's also something that we all need to spend our time figuring out the truth that applies to us. And sometimes it reaches on all different sides of the spectrum. So why don't you take us back? I mean, I know we always get new listeners, and maybe they're not going to go back and listen to every episode you've done. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your history as a scientist? Because, like I said, you've been working in a lab. You've literally dedicated your life to science. And I have such a deep respect for your commitment to your work. And generally, that's where, the best work comes from, is somebody who's put so much focus into it.
Okay, Joe. Well, I got my real start in science in the Boston, Cambridge science community. I was a graduate student at Harvard. Harvard was connected to MIT and all kinds of research institutes around there. And I felt so overwhelmed by all these great scientists. I'm just this little 22-year-old. And so the paradigm leaders were and are so dominant. It's extremely hard to get out from under the paradigm. You don't even know you're under it. So I did my PhD. I worked on a mutant fungus. And this fungus couldn't produce body mass. It was using up tons of oxygen, oxidating its food, but it couldn't produce much body mass. That paper was published 1971 in Science. I doubt that it has more than 30 citations after 55 years. And I didn't know where that stood. It surely wasn't part of the paradigm. Then I moved over from the Harvard Biolabs to the Harvard Medical School at Massachusetts General Hospital, full of big shots walking around. I mean, you were just so overwhelmed by all these big shots. And I started working on this project of cancer cells eventually. And they needed methionine, and yet they could make methionine like crazy. It was so out of the paradigm that it took a publication from the University of Singapore, or the Singapore Research Institute, 19 plus 26, 35 years, 45 years later, that paper, I realized what I found, that the cancer cells were addicted to methionine. That paper showed a similar to result in 2019 that I found in 1976. Of course, they had a million times more sophisticated ways to do it, but they claimed that cancer, in their case, the cancer initiating cells were addicted to methionine. And I realized all cancer cells are addicted to methionine. Stem, no stem. But it took all that time because I was so out of the paradigm. So that when I first got started, the paradigm was all cancers are caused by viruses. That turned out to be 99.99% wrong.
Hi, this is Joe Grumbine, and I wanted to share an update. The platform that hosts this podcast has made some changes to the subscriber settings, and we have a number of subscriber-only episodes that we offer to the supporters, and for a minimum of $3 a month, we can get you signed up. And if you're already signed up and you're having some kind of trouble locating these episodes in the other platforms, I would say maybe the best answer is to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. I'm sorry for the hassle. I don't have any way to make a change, but I'm very grateful for all the support. Thank you. And yet there's still people today that make that claim.
Well, there's some are, Joe. I mean, for example, your squamous
Mine
cell.
was, yeah. It turns out mine was, yeah.
Probably the virus had some role, but it couldn't have the only role because everybody's infected with that virus and they don't all get cancer. So it took something else.
Yeah. There's something else going on for
It
sure.
played some role.
Yeah.
But it's not, hey, there's the virus, there's the cancer. No,
not at all.
Like that. It's not flu.
Right.
Boy, so the paradigm and the leaders, they control everything. They control what gets in the fancy journals. They could control who gets to be the big talkers at the meetings, and that's very important. When you're a big talker, when you make a big lecture at the meeting, you're like a god, and everybody else is just picking rice. So that the paradigm is so overwhelming. And, the paradigm can be doing science, but it might not be science that gets at the question you want it to. It can discover something, but not what you want. Science is not the message from God. It's a way to get data, a logical way. You collect the information and you organize it, and you make a hypothesis based on your data, and you try to substantiate or disprove your hypothesis. But you might be all doing all this, going in the wrong direction, discovering stuff, but not discovering what you want to discover. How the hell will we cure cancer? Not cure, maybe not the word, but control. So here we are today, Joe. Same thing. So there's this rag. I'll get it in a minute. Hold on a second for me, please. You know what it's doing? You read this rag. It's called the cancer letter. It's very inside. I get it because UCSD has a kind of system-wide subscription. Otherwise, you got to shell out $555 a year, and I can almost eat the whole year for that. So, it comes out every Friday. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what the current bullshit is. And sorry for the French. And
it's all good. It's true.
So last week's, here's the cover. It's a bulb, man. The idea. So the feature story is this guy. His name is Tyler Jacks.
Okay.
Boy, is he a paradigm leader. And by the way, he hates my guts. Just so
that means you're doing good work, I'll bet.
It could mean that. So he, I don't know the whole story, how he did it, but there's a foundation. It's called Breakthrough Cancer.
Okay.
He's the head of it. And this story, interview, page. He's interviewing. What the greatest thing ever was this foundation, because people are working together in a radical way. They've never worked together in a radical way. Radical collaboration. I think we've never delivered on that. Okay. So I'm reading this. 18 of the best cancer centers are in a kind of consortium working together. So, and what are they doing? So one of the main things they're concentrating on is glioblastoma. That's a brain cancer. It's really, I mean, and a lot of it, maybe the most of it happens in kids. It ain't good. So they're going on. Yeah, we're going to find out everything. and they're taking from a couple of these patients 40 biopsies from their brains. I mean, they're delivering a drug through the skull and taking out brain, and then they're going to test all these genes that they know are that's it, the genes. So it's not the viruses anymore, it's the genes. And that's what's causing the cancers. They're going on and on and on about, what a great thing it is, and all the best scientists are doing it. And this guy, Tyler, he's the leader. And they don't give any scan, anything from any of the patients. How they doing? They're giving them some immuno treatment, whatever, that's delivered into the brain. And then they deliver it in, then they drill out some biopsy, and they're going to find all the genes turning on and off during the treatment. And that's going to solve it. Then 3 days ago, I got a scan from my previous the father of my previous glioblastoma patient. She was about 13 when we were treating her. She had chemo, radiation, low methionine diet, methionase, and a lot of supplements. Well, she's 18 or 19.
Okay.
And I looked at that scan. I'm not a radiologist at all, and I've asked Dr. Sato to look at it. And you get a before the image in 2022 before treatment started. And then Chihiro's going to send it around to the Zoom.
Okay.
This monster thing in 2022, and the one that was just a couple weeks ago, is the same circle. You see something, it was like a crater.
Wow.
Something was there. Like a crater after the meteor or something.
Kind of like mine. I had this giant tumor. Now I've got a little bit of scar tissue or some.
Oh, exactly.
Little bit of something there, but it's.
So these guys, the paradigm leaders from this foundation, Breakthrough Cancer. I love this modest name, Breakthrough Cancer. Spent $125 million drilling these two patients, biopsying the brain. We probably spent a few $100s, well, a few $1,000s probably for methionase for the girl. And the publication fee was free. We published the first paper on it. We're going to publish another one based on this great new scan. It's the same disease. And this young lady is done great. And do you think that's going to enter the mainstream of knowledge? It'll be published in one of our nice little journals.
All right.
Published in Nature or Cell or New England Journal or all these papers that these guys control. Oh, no, 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 no. There's a paradigm. The paradigm, these guys now, Tyler Jacks and his hundreds of millions, the new thing is drilling the patient, getting the biopsies. Biopsies and biopsies and biopsies. See how you're doing every week. And they're going to be no hypothesis. They're just going to be looking at whatever they know how to look at.
Wow.
That's the paradigm thing. And here, and here are we really, I think, we don't have proof. We haven't done a trial, but, you say, well, she's an N of one. Well, so are you. So am I.
So am I. So are all these people. Yeah, we've got dozens and dozens. Yeah.
And if we're doing good and better than anybody ever thought we could, isn't that good? But we can't get out of the paradigm. This is the problem. And if you read Kuhn's book, Kuhn, everybody should read that. Something Scientific Revolutions. It's all about paradigm shift. And he uses the history of the planets and the sun. And, at one time, the Earth was the center of the universe. Well, it ain't anymore. it's so interesting to see how the science evolved over 5 or 6 centuries, and we still don't know what's going on. These astronomers talk about dark matter.
Right. They have no idea what it is.
What's that? Oh, that's the stuff we can't see.
Right.
I see.
That's most of the universe.
That's what they say, but they don't know what it is. Oh, it's dark matter.
Yes.
Okay. It's a name.
Right. Well, remember, they used to call it the ether.
Then I'll tell you something else, Joe. You take one of the smallest proteins, the smallest of the small. It's about 100 amino acids.
Okay.
These are the histones that wrap around the genes. Some of them 400 and 500.
Okay.
The big ones, the big enzymes that do all these fancy things.
Yeah.
So the 100 amino, each position of 100 amino acids has a choice of 20. There are 20 different amino acids that could be in each slot.
Right.
So the probability of this forming by itself, for example, spontaneous, is 1 over 20 with 100 zeros.
Wow.
Then these schmucks, they come out and say, oh, the universe formed from a big bang 14 billion years ago.
It just happened. Yeah.
It just happened.
Right.
Bing. God said bing, and it was bing.
Right.
And 14 billion is nothing. For example, if you compare gorilla hemoglobin and human hemoglobin, 3 amino acids changed over 6 million years.
Right.
How do you explain a teeny little protein that has a probability of evolving by itself of 1 over 20 with 100 zeros? There's not nearly enough time in the universe.
Right.
Not nearly. 13 or 14 billion that these guys say is the age of the universe is like
a blink of an eye. Yeah.
And so, what's that? The pyramid is so stupid, but that's the pyramid. The Big Bang happened 14 billion years ago, and then there was origin of life on the Earth 4 billion years ago. Nobody has any idea what's the origin of life. How did matter become living?
Right. Yeah, nobody's ever recreated.
No, the paradigm can't explain this at all.
Exactly. And not only that, but they can't make it happen with all the technology and all the things.
Make it happen, Joe, and they never will make it happen.
Of course not.
They never were, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, we're not here to do that. Yeah.
So here we are, the paradigm. We can't get out from under the paradigm. So let's go back to cancer.
Okay.
We can't get out under the paradigm. Here's this guy with his 125 million, and he's got another 125 to go. And they're drilling people in the brain and taking out biopsies and measuring all the genes that they know, all the genes that cause cancer that don't really. And that's what they're doing. And here's a little guy like us, hey, maybe try a low methionine diet.
Exactly.
Try a little methionase, maybe a little ivermectin, a little this, and a little of that. Hey, maybe you're going to get a good result. But that's so far from the paradigm. Is it a conspiracy? No, it's not a conspiracy. They're not all these guys are, hey, we're going to keep this, we're planning the paradigm. It's human nature.
That's part of what I wanted to get into a little bit is, when you talk about like this guy, you always end up talking about money. Because that's the thing that makes all this happen.
Do all these fancy things, Joe.
Right. Everything's
money.
A lot of it.
Money. And it's not that some people say, oh, yeah, all the money's there because they don't want a cure. I tell you, Joe, they don't know they don't have the first idea to get to quote unquote a cure. Stupidity reigns much greater than any kind of conspiracy. Stupidity and ignorance and arrogance
Well, and if you think about it, the companies that are funding most of the research are for-profit companies.
FDA funds most of it, but
Okay.
the companies also do research. They never get anything from it, but they do.
Okay. All right. But at the end of it, generally, the outcome is some sort of a drug or a treatment or something. And the idea generally is that it's going to be some sort of a treatment, right? Like it's going to help you maybe prolong your life or maybe knock some of the cancer back. I mean, all of these treatments that they have out there, from chemotherapy to radiation to immunotherapy to even these, more cutting edge things that are out there, none of them, I don't believe, are even attempting to reverse the disease. They're trying to,
They they all have some good effect.
right.
There's no
Exactly.
question,
Yeah.
but it's not enough.
Right.
How did we start chemotherapy? It was Dr. Farber in the 40s. He started making these anti-folate chemicals because he thought the cancers needed folate, which they do. And and one of the first cancer patients in the whole world getting chemo was none other than Babe Ruth, who
Wow.
had
I
a
didn't know that.
cancer like yours,
Wow.
a squamous cell that was, of course, way advanced. And he actually had a brief kind of remission. And then, he recurred and he passed away. So that was Dr. Farber, and the next generation that followed him were so great people. Dr. Fry, Dr. Fryereich, Dr. DeVita, Dr. Holland. They were curing kids of leukemia that were sure death. They could cure them. And that was a great paradigm for that. But for people with so-called solid cancers like you have from tissues rather than from blood,
Right.
they're very different. And these kind of chemo, they have some effect. You got a good effect. I think my opinion, right or wrong, is that you were under very strict methionine restriction, which helped these drugs work a lot better.
And the fasting and the oxygen and all of the
Nobody
things.
wants to listen. Even the patients don't want to listen.
Right.
The paradigm is so strong. The patients who don't know anything
Right.
are influenced by it, either through the cult of their doctor, or I don't know. I don't know what it is. They don't want to listen. They intrinsically kind of know it's not in the paradigm, so they're not going to bother with it.
One of anytime as that, people start talking about, especially the doctors, when they're saying, well, this is where the treatment is right now, when they were trying to give me the radiation and the chemo and that was it.
That
They
was the
wouldn't,
guideline of a big institution.
yeah,
They they had to give you that because they're
exactly.
working for the UCI, and that was the guideline there. And
Right.
when they said we can't treat you in another way, they
Yeah,
were telling you the truth.
exactly. But I think to myself, what about eggs?
What
Eggs,
about that?
eggs, chicken eggs.
Yeah.
If you follow the science of eggs for the last 50 years, they've gone from the best thing in the world to the worst thing in the world about a dozen times. And one day eggs are the best thing, eat 20 of them a day. The next day, don't touch an egg because they're horrible. And it's the same science.
You're correct.
Well, that's just it. Exactly. Neither of them are right.
So bad. It's the nutrient of the new chicken.
Right. Exactly.
There's a lot of good stuff in it.
Right. It's one of the most complete foods there is. It's like eating seeds. A lot of the seeds are really good for you.
You can't overdo them.
Exactly. So I I I always have that in my head. And then you have, like, when COVID came along, you've got this dichotomy. You have treatments like that ultrasound treatment I was trying to get access to, but histotripsy that is only available for liver tumors. But there's evidence that, it's an ultrasound that can destroy a solid tumor without destroying the surrounding tissue. And there's a lot of good evidence that it could be helpful, but they've only approved it for this one little type of cancer in a liver, and it has to fit these criterion, or FDA says no, nothing else matters. And they've got all these rigors that say, well, in order to have a treatment that's available through insurance or through, that's accepted here in the United States, you have to go through all of these rigors. I understand the reasons of safety and whatnot, but then you get a pandemic come along, and all of a sudden all that goes out the window. And they're like, oh, we're going to rush it through and we're going to make it up. Here we go. We got our vaccine. You're good. You're good. You're good. And I'm not saying one thing or the other about the vaccine. I'm not saying one thing or the other about any of it. It just seems that the rules of science are awfully fungible sometimes.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
We go back to Jenner in the late 1700s.
Uh-huh.
Smallpox was wiping out Europe. It was going to wipe out the whole Europe.
Right.
And maybe it would have wiped out the whole human population. It might have.
Could have.
Put the whole human population back into the cave.
Right.
Here's this guy, Jenner. And there's no such guy as Jenner anymore. The bravery and intelligence.
Right.
So he's watching everything, and he's all the people that are dying of smallpox, but the milkmaids don't die.
Okay.
Why is that? And this guy, out of no paradigm, out of nothing, he figures, wait a minute, the milkmaids are becoming immune. That maybe he knew the cows got cowpox, and he knew cowpox was similar to smallpox.
Okay.
And he figured, oh, the milkmaids, they're getting something that is making them immune. So he started collecting the pustules or whatever from the cows.
Right.
And he found this little kid. I mean, today he would be the worst. He would be 1,000 times worse than Epstein.
Right.
He finds this little kid. He says, come here, kid. And he injects some of the cowpox pustule stuff. And then you know what he does? A few weeks later, he injects them with smallpox pustules.
Whoa.
And the kid lived.
Wow.
And that was the first vaccine. And you know the name of the smallpox virus?
No.
Yersinia.
Wow.
Named after his vaccine.
Wow.
So this guy, Jenner, and of course, he wrote a paper on it, I guess it was the British Journal of something, and it got rejected. Of course, it got rejected. It was rejected. So there he was. He saved the world. And then here we go. How many hundred? Let's see, 1790, 1990, 290, up 230 years later, we get COVID, which was almost seemingly as dangerous as smallpox.
Right.
The morgues were filling up. They had to stack people. They had to rent trailers with a cooler to stack the bodies in the hospitals.
Yeah, a lot of people died.
Holy shit. And there's this Hungarian lady, I forgot her name, with a K. She says, I know how to make the vaccine, mRNA vaccine. Worked on it for years. Nobody paid any attention to her. Then she started showing it works on COVID. That vaccine, Joe, maybe some people had some side effects from it. It saved the world again. And she got the Nobel Prize along with her collaborator. She couldn't keep a job. They fired her here, fired her there. She was some assistant to some assistant at the University of Pennsylvania or something, something, something. Wow. So are are vaccines perfect? Of course not. But I think they've saved the world at least twice. And I'll take another example. When I was growing up in the 50s, my mom wouldn't let me go out in the summer. I could only go to the ball field or whatever. I couldn't go to the. She wouldn't allow me to go to the pool or any of that stuff because you're going to get polio.
Oh, wow.
Look at Itzhak Perlman. He's about my age. Comes out, plays his violin, comes out on the sticks. His legs never recovered. That's the way it was. And Salk, he invents one, and it isn't quite there. And Sabin, he invented, I think, an oral one. Neither of them won the Nobel Prize, but they didn't save the world, but they sure saved a big part of it. The polio vaccine,
Sure.
the measles vaccine, all of it. Did some people get a bad reaction to the vaccine? A few. You go up and you fly in the airplane. Well, airplanes crash. Well, not that often.
Right.
So there we are.
That's where my concern comes from is not, I think, you take your chances. You want to get a vaccine, get your vaccine. You don't, take your chances. But when it comes to cancer,
It's totally different, Joe.
yeah, I know. That's the point.
A billion times more simple than cancer.
Yes, but still, the
price, and we can do something. What's the cause of cancer? Jesus, what?
But that's where I think to myself, why don't they make these experimental treatments easy to come by? Because we know for sure the standard of care offers what they call a survival rate, which is 3 to 5 years generally. And then after that, they're not really so worried about it, right? They don't even know what to think after that.
In the paradigm, there's nothing in the paradigm to replace it.
Exactly. But what if we were to, and then again, it's just me thinking crazy because I do that sometimes. But what if we were to make it really easy instead of really difficult? So we know this, all right? If you take a cancer and it doesn't get treated right, it's going to spread and mutate and metastasize and eventually kill you. That's what most cancers will do. Some will just sit there and slowly grow along, but most of them are going to get ugly, and ultimately you're going to have a big problem and probably die from it if it doesn't get treated right. Most of the treatments are also pretty harsh on the body, going to leave you a lot worse than you started. And again, I'm not talking about the people doing what we're doing. I'm talking about the average guy that goes into this standard of care, 99 and 3/4% of the people out there that do that. I think to myself, there's a handful of people that get into a study, right? But you got to qualify. You got to have certain conditions. You got to know about this study. You got to have all these little things to happen to be even take part in a study. And in a study, it's possible that you get a placebo. You don't even get the treatment, right?
Oh, these trials are terrible.
And what if they just said, we've got something that shows promise. Maybe it runs through the first phase that shows that it's not, a time bomb that's going to kill most people, right? First they show the relative safety of a treatment, right? That says, okay, well, it may not work, but it's probably not going to kill you. What if it gets through that phase and then we say, well, let's open it up to virtually anybody wants to try it?
Joe, that's the way it is in Mexico.
Right.
Mexico doesn't have an FDA.
Right.
The Mexican government says we trust our doctors.
Yes. And people go down to Mexico for treatments, but it's not always a good idea to go down to Mexico.
That's correct.
And that's the problem. Like, why the hell don't we do that here? It just makes
It's not in the paradigm, Joe.
Yeah.
Those billion-dollar trials, or almost billion-dollar. That's part of the paradigm.
Right. And that's really what
we're trapped in the paradigm. How are we going to have a paradigm shift? Well, here's one little example. The biggest cancer meeting of the year is in San Diego. It's called the AACR, American Association of Cancer Research. Did they invite me? No way. Then they said, I got some little blurb. Would you like to participate in our mentor program for high school kids? I said, sure.
Okay.
Then they give me a follow-up letter. Well, there's a program that's on this day from this hour to that hour. Brr. I said, well, I'm sorry. I can't afford the registration fee, which is about $1,500 or $1,600.
Wow.
And I said, but you know what? I'm going to open up the lab of anti-cancer, and every one of those high school kids is welcome to come over, and I will share with them my 61 years in research.
Wow.
How many other people can share 61 years of research?
I don't know any.
You know what the answer was? Oh, we're very sorry. We don't have enough time to get all the permissions from the parents.
Wow.
And this one for off-site. I mean, off-site? Who's off-site? Some cancer organization that comes here and takes over the convention center, or a lab that's been here for 33 years? Which one is off-site?
Right.
That was it. That was it. And they said, oh, we hope to see you at the next meeting in Orlando next year.
For what? Yeah.
You know, we've got something that can, as you know, from every Sunday, we're helping a lot of people. Can that can even crack the door in this of 20 or 25,000 people that are going to attend that thing? Will they even give you a little crack in the door? Of course not. So I'm just giving you an example of me, one little guy. I mean, the paradigm is so overwhelming.
Here's something that I have been so impressed with the last several of the experiments you've been doing. You did one about cysteine absorption, and you demonstrated that the healthy cells need cysteine, and if you don't, if you take away the cysteine, you can kill the cancer cells, but the healthy cells die too. That was huge. And then you've done over and over again the methionine experiment that says, well, you take away the methionine, the cancer cells die, but the healthy cells stay alive. And then you just did one recently, and I don't know if you've published it or not, but you were talking about one about glucose. And a similar thing.
We published one, the same kind of experiment with glutamine.
Glutamine, that was the other one. And so these were
data that will come out maybe in 2 weeks or maybe in 6 weeks.
But anyways, you've done some, like you say, they're high school science fair project type experiments. But these are experiments that could be replicated over and over and over again. And they unequivocally upend some of the quote unquote paradigm science.
Well, it's, the Warburg paradigm. But do you think these little tiny observations that we're making, we're publishing them in good journals, but small impact relatively, but very good journals, approved journals, they get on PubMed. Do you think that the stuff coming out of our lab is going to move that paradigm? I don't know. Not in my lifetime, it ain't.
You think it might get a little foot in the door somehow? Somebody's going to see that.
Well, it might. I don't rule it out. I always say this, if some famous person, Elon, whatever, comes and says, give me methionine restriction and gets a good result, that could have a very big effect of shifting the paradigm. We've not run into anybody like here's President Biden, okay?
Exactly.
President Biden has prostate cancer, maybe more advanced than Scott, but really the same idea. Scott is in remission with his methionine restriction, his chemo, and his radiation. Is Joe Biden going to go into remission? No way. They both had bone metastatic prostate cancer, and Joe Biden will be treated by all the guys, the paradigm leaders. Of course, he's going to die.
You know, what blows me away is Steve Jobs. Now, Steve Jobs decided he didn't want radiation or chemo, and he had all the money in the world to spend on all the research in the world, and he did all kinds of supplements and different natural things, but he never found you.
No, all the money in the world, he couldn't find me. And Elon, with his 700 bill, he can't find me.
And that to me, it just blows me away. I mean, like for me, I just really wanted to live, and I was willing to do whatever it took.
Universe, Joe. You understand? You entered a parallel universe that have literally no connection.
Right.
Or imagine the animals that live in the sea. Do they
Yeah.
know about the animals on the land? How
No.
could they know about the animals on the land? How could they
Oh,
know?
there's no way. Yeah.
These are parallel universes that have a tiny little chance of connection.
Right,
And
right.
you were just somehow you got my email address, and I have my own way of working is everybody, no matter who, that makes
Yeah.
an inquiry to me, I respond to them right
Yep.
away.
And here we are.
And here we are. By just some brute luck, the fish in the water figured out to contact somebody on the land.
Well, I'm sure glad that I did. And I would love to keep pressing somehow the notion of these experiments that you've done, a way to do them bigger or more, or with more complicated subjects, or somehow to keep working those experiments to where more people can see them.
But we keep publishing, and the
Yeah.
list of papers gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just by the literal gravity of all the papers stacked up, few of them might get noticed.
Right. Well, and I think that's it. We just keep going, and
Yeah,
we keep putting it out, and
the patients getting better, and
we're getting a better leg to stand on. We have more and more case studies.
we
You know,
do.
I mean, I've broken through Dr. Song.
Planned out already.
Yeah. And I got Dr. Song to tell me about cancer's addiction to methionine, and that wouldn't have happened.
Really nice Dr. Song story.
Yes. And none of that
We have a patient in Russia, stage 4 lung cancer, like Emil, Dr. Exame. He's in really bad shape. He's gone through all the first line and second line drugs. And Dr. Song, despite his professed discomfort in making an opinion like this from so far away with so little knowledge, sent me a beautiful email letter today with all kinds of options for this patient. He said, I hate doing this because I don't have all the information I need.
But he did it.
I want to help your patient
Yes.
as much as I can. He said in the letter, I hate doing this.
Yes. But he did it.
He did it. He did it. The guy is a saint.
Oh, I'm so happy. I know when we just talked last Monday,
There's no question. Anybody with cancer and is having trouble, go see Dr. Song.
Yes, 100%.
I'll go there with you.
Wow. Well, that makes me so happy. Well, Robert, we've consumed much more than a half an hour here, but it's such an important conversation we're having, and I'm going to keep talking about this work. I'm going to keep talking about it, and we just never know.
Everybody reads the Kuhn book, Structure of Scientific Revolution. People got to read it, and that'll help them a lot to understand where we are.
I got it. I read it. I'm going to read it again, even.
You can read again and again.
I got the audio book, and it's just it's not particularly exciting reading, but it's powerful. And if you engage it and you really start thinking about what you're reading, You can't take it down. You can't. It will jar your world.
Joe.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Well, Robert, as always, this is important conversation. I'm so grateful to know you. I'm so grateful that we're able to have these conversations. And I know even sometimes it doesn't feel like
you're
it.
the living example of what can happen.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine. I want to thank all of our listeners for making this show possible, and we will see you next week.
Hope to see all of you on our Zoom on Sunday, too.
Yes, absolutely.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.